We need to let the European Union know unequivocally that we're the fifth largest economy in the world, 10th largest armed forces, a permanent member of the UN Security Council. We do not need the EU. We can stand on our own 2 feet, and they should stay in flipping Brussels. The EU has fought a fantastic propaganda campaign. You know, it's embedded itself in the psyche of people in this country, making them believe that it's a force for good. Having been in Strasbourg and Brussels, it's actually a malignant force. It's an anti-democratic force. It undermines the principles of democracy in the countries that can constitute its members. It's an absolutely awful entity. And we've got to be shot of it once, and we've got to get out of it once and for all.
There is a large part of our populace who, and I sort of regard them as the woke illiberal elite, who don't have confidence in the United Kingdom, who are desperate to give away our sovereignty to what this greater project, where they see that governance is going to be better, but actually there's no basis for it in history. In fact, these kind of supranational entities inevitably end up failing. The United States being one notable exception, but they have a common culture, common language, common laws and everything. We've got nothing in common with the European setup. We are our own nation with our own laws, our own heritage, and we need to be prepared to stand up and be an independent trading nation and cut those strings with the European Union.
Before I got involved in politics, I was in this wonderful bubble of ignorance. I thought that our government really cared about the United Kingdom, that they would always act in the national interest. The BBC portrayed news as it was, and that everything I read, I took pretty much at face value. Now, sadly, the mist has been lifted and the ignorance is gone. And I've woken up and I've realized we live in a kind of matrix world where there are forces at play which are anti the national interest. And I'm afraid the BBC has been hijacked by them. It would just be so much better if they could have a rational, balanced debate about Brexit. I'm not looking for the Brexit cause to be pushed to the extent that the Remainers' views are somehow squashed in the way that the Brexit voice has been squashed. But they should at least allow us to make the case, make the sovereign case, make the case for the economy. And by the way, we'll be much better off economically outside than we will be in. And they don't let us do it. They just shut us down. And that's, you know, it's a tragedy, really. I've never once heard Boris paint a vision of post-Brexit Britain. I haven't heard him talk about the wonderful dividends that we would get and what they are. I haven't heard him talk about the deregulation that would be available to us and how we could fire up British industry, fire up the city and everything else. At best, he is a reluctant Brexiteer. At worst, he is a prime minister in the same mold of David Cameron and Theresa May, dragged kicking and screaming into Brexit.
When people talk about making a compromise and a deal, that's around the edges of the grey areas of a deal. But actually the key issues here, what we're fighting for here is our sovereignty. We're not fighting for an extra bit of tariff perhaps, or, you know, greater access to their fishing, dare I might say it. We're fighting actually for our sovereignty, and there can be no compromise on taking back control, as Boris promised he would do, of our laws, our borders, our cash and our fishing. That is, you cannot compromise on that. So when I heard David Frost a couple of months ago saying, well, we might have to compromise on 40% of our red lines. Well, which bit of sovereignty do you want to give away? Boris Johnson won his thumping majority on a promise to get Brexit done. The only contract that matters is the contract Boris Johnson has with the people of the United Kingdom, not the withdrawal agreement, not what it says in the political declaration. He must honour that contract, the promise he made on page 5 of his manifesto, and if necessary, leave without a deal. Leaving aside entirely the mess they've made of the pandemic, which is going to leave this country highly indebted, with nothing to show for it on an economic basis. You know, the idea was that he was going to spend money to level up the country. I know this is a separate subject, but we've ended up actually spending a colossal amount of money with the economy still in the doldrums,
with the North being hit much harder than the South, as inevitably it would happen, and with the gap between the poor and the rich going to grow. So you're going to have him having failed to deliver Brexit for the Red Wall and having economically crushed the Red Wall. Unless a new political force emerges, we better get ready for a Starmer-led government in 2024.
What's there to negotiate? You know, what's there left to negotiate? We've got our red lines. If they weren't prepared to, grant us our red lines, which, by the way, merely require us to get our sovereignty back, we should have walked out of the room. Boris said we'd leave on the 30th of June if they wouldn't give us what we want. He didn't. He then said the end of July, he didn't walk. Then he said the 15th of October. They still haven't given us what we want. And we're still talking to them. I'm sick of talking. Where's the bright future that Brexit offers us? We don't need them. We voted to leave because we think there's a brighter future outside the European Union. We don't want to stay in there, hanging on to their flipping coattails, hoping that they'll grant us some modicum degree, some sort of minuscule degree of sovereignty. I want out. I want our £18 billion a year back. I want to levy tariffs on them. I want to make sure that those industries that relied on trade with the European Union have adequate government grants and support so they can transition away from their dependency on the EU. And I want to trade freely with the rest of the world. I want to deregulate. I don't want a new green revolution. I want to get rid of those blooming environmental laws that come across from the European Union. I want to reduce tax on fuel. I want the poor and working class in this country to be re-energized, to be put on their front foot, leveling up the country. Wasn't that another one of his promises? It just rides roughshod over everything it doesn't like. So the notion that we now should surrender our sovereignty to the EU because of some obscure little passage in a pathetic, crappy withdrawal agreement is utterly absurd. You know, we should be just ripping it up. Boris has to be, but Boris is being timid. He needs to come out on his front foot. He needs to call them out for what they are and rip it up. He keeps referring to the EU as our friends in Europe. They're not our friends. They've done nothing friendly. They've treated us with contempt for the last 3 or 4 years. We've got to be rid of them.